Well, hello! I'd like to welcome you to my review of the Sheaffer Imperial 2 Deluxe. This is a part one of a two-part series of reviews because we're going to take a look at Sheaffer's touchdown filling system and the snorkel filler. So let's dive into it. If videos like this interest you, where I talk about fountain pens both new and old and at all price points, I would invite you to subscribe. And hey, what was your experience when these pens came out? Were these worthy competitors of the ballpoint? Let us know down in the comments. Actual pneumatic filler mechanism came out in 1949. Now, Sheaffer's version came out in 1949. There was actually an earlier one by the Chilton called the Chilton pneumatic filler, came out in 1924. It was a slightly different mechanism where you had to hold your thumb over the top to create the pressure. So Sheaffer disposes of that necessity. Basically, your idea is air pressure compresses the sac, pulls in the ink as the sac expands. So it's supposed to be a nice, simple way to fill a pen. So let's take a look at it. So what we have here, the Sheaffer Imperial Deluxe. This is a Model 2. So this would have been a pen probably from maybe around 1961, I'm estimating. I couldn't really get an exact date, but if you take a look here, what we have, kind of a squared off finial, metal cap with white dot, a little bit of writing on it. Here we have Sheaffer, made in the USA, because back then they were. This cap, Sheaffer, made in the USA. And that's all we have. Uncap it. One of the ways that I came at that date were the three, what would you call these, grabber dealios? The things that hold the cap on. I'm sorry, the name just slipped away as I was saying that. Sheaffer, and then there's a R for trademark, I think that's an R, and this is made in the USA again. And this is a Triumph nib. Now this one would have been made out of steel, but what makes it a Triumph nib is it's conical. And that's one of the things these two pens have in common. Next week, you'll be looking at this one, which is a Sheaffer snorkel filler, also with a conical Triumph nib, with a little something extra, which we'll get to next week. You can see the feed design there. The neat thing with the feed is it actually continues up quite a ways through the section. What you get when you have this cylindrical nib is you first of all, you have a stronger nib than a regular open nib. Like here's a pen repair project I'm doing right now, but this is a standard open nib, and you know, if I press hard enough, it's going to just bend it. So apparently this is stronger. You've got more ink channels well into the section that allows for better flow, and it behaves better at high altitudes. Also, the pen can be carried in any position, and when you flip it up like this, it allows the ink to flow back into the barrel. The taper at the end, so it's not as visible on the newer ones like this. So I'm going to bring up my old one again. You can see it kind of tips out there. The reason for that is strength for writing through carbon copies without actually slicing up the paper. And it could be turned upside down for a fine line, which will be interesting to see how that works out with this one. Now, let's take a look at the guts of the pen. In the 90s, Sheaffer actually came out with a version of this pen that was cartridge converter, but this is not that. We have a sac protector. What this does, when I do an outstroke, which you haven't seen me do the outstroke yet, it actually creates a little bit of a vacuum, which would expand the sac, and then when it gets air into it, it would at the top of the upstroke, it would cause the sac to compress and possibly expel ink if there was ink in it. So this keeps it from expanding. You can see the sac there. That's important to our story. Because if I unscrew the finial, I've got this dealio bopper, and you don't see the nice little O-ring that's in there. But basically, I pull it out, I've got air in there, and then I push it down. The air pressure squeezes that sac until we get past this point, and then the air can be released, and the sac will expand. And if I do it right, let me put everything back together properly. If I do it right, you might be able to hear it. Here's a slight hiss there, and maybe you can make out maybe a tiny little breather hole right there. Not on the other side, I just happened to think of that, but no, there isn't one. So I push this in, compressing the sac, compressing, and it hissed. Let me just do it near the microphone. So pulling out, that's all the way out, and compressing. And it's compressed. So hopefully you heard the two hisses. So interesting mechanism. And if you think about the era, we're starting to compete, 1949, with pens like the Parker 51, which had a very simple aerometric filling mechanism. So that would have made this one a little bit more special, a little bit more different. I feel like I didn't prepare for anything tonight. I'm filming in the evening because it's been hot, and I just didn't want the noise of the air conditioner going, and you know me and filming late at night. So, I should tell you about the ink. So a viewer was very kind to send this to me, and I've been saving it till I did this review. So we'll unscrew this bit, pull it out, stick this in here, push down, and it is full. The modern one, if you buy that modern one that was only out for a few years, I guess you had to do 2 strokes since it couldn't be quite as efficient. But this is a 1-stroke deal, and you just wait, a few seconds. Okay, perhaps not the most exciting shade of blue that I've seen, but I'm not going to hold it against it. It's vintage. It's probably older than me. So the ink, of course, is vintage Sheaffer script. I have never honestly used modern Sheaffer ink, so I don't know anything about it. I misspelled script. SKRIP. Blue. And then there's a 42, whatever that means. Alright, and I think you can tell, not a flex nib. Although next week when I review the other one, that's not a flex nib either. But there were flex nibs of this Triumph design. Just not this one. So, I don't know, it's very smooth. Not super exciting, but there we go. Wetness and flow. I want you to notice it's having no trouble keeping up. This isn't a bad pen to write with. This would be what I'd consider a daily writer pen. It's not one of those you use to show off your ink or to have an amazing writing experience. It's just a pen you use to get things written. Oh, somebody's got a loud radio. Hope that doesn't get me demonetized. Play that funky music. All right, and let's do the smear test. Yeah. All right. And in the defense of being unfair, that is not some passerby in a car. That is my neighbor who's much older than me. So, hopefully the microphone's not picking that up. All right, smear test, wetness and flow, and let's try out that reverse writing for those who are into that kind of thing. And apparently it's supposed to provide 2 nib sizes. Or at least, that is scratchy. So I'll be curious next week to see how that one does. I never do reverse writing, so I've never tried it with either pen. All right, let's turn our attention to a longer form writing sample. All right, and as a final thing, we'll do the world-famous Peer-Gustafson test, where we'll evaluate its flow and such. I think that kept up quite well, don't you? All right, so if you're expecting a flashy, exciting pen, this isn't it. This is a vintage pen that you use to just do your business-like, serious writing. That said, I think it does the job very well. The filling mechanism is a little bit dramatic, so that's always fun. I have thought it would be fun if you could make one of these as a demonstrator and actually watch the sac compress, but I don't know. I think it's Edison has a modern version of this. I don't remember what they call it, but anyway, but they don't sell it as a demonstrator either. I mean, you can get demonstrator finishes, but all the guts are still wrapped up in metal, so I'm sure there's a good reason why related to materials, and I'm pretty sure it has to do with strength. So, one last test, especially you may have noticed, B-roll again, a relatively short, stumpy clip. How does it do with the pocket test? As it turns out, slipped right on there. Not a lot of real estate holding it in place, of course, but there you be. So, what do you think? I enjoyed it. I like these slim black vintage pens. This is Sheaffer going about their business, making good pens, and this is about 1961, so the ballpoints are coming out. They've got to compete, and yeah, they got to make filling as easy as possible. Lever fillers aren't quite doing it for people anymore. And this is what they came up with. Other than Chilton, I don't know if anybody else ever used a pneumatic filler. So, if videos like this interest you, where I talk about fountain pens both new and old and at all price points, I would invite you to subscribe. And hey, I know some of my viewers out there were alive at the time these pens were around. How did they compete? How were people perceiving them at the time? Let us know down in the comments. Or if you have anything else to say, I always welcome comments. So I want to, maybe you could tell me how this blue, this vintage blue, compares to modern Sheaffer blue, if Sheaffer even still makes ink. So I want to thank you for watching. So we'll see you later. Bye-bye.